Hi everyone, my name is Neely, and today we're going to talk about the cognitive psychology principle of perception. In order to tackle this concept, first we need to know something very important: pattern recognition. Information coming from our senses must be organized, and one way that we do this is through something called Gestalt grouping principles. Organization is key to being able to make sense of information, and there are 5 Gestalt grouping principles. So, let's take a walk around my neighborhood and try to find them. Our first Gestalt principle is called figure ground, and just as it sounds, it means that part of the image will be treated as the object and the other will be treated as the background. So, take this snail for example. The camera is focused on it, he's the image, and everything you see behind him is the background. Next, take a look at these flowers. They represent a principle called similarity. We organize objects that are similar together. Our third principle is proximity. These dandelions represent proximity because we group objects together that are close together. Our next principle is called good continuation, and it can be demonstrated by looking up at the branches of a tree. Now, even though some of the branches are out of our shot, we can still assume it'll continue in a regular way and that it doesn't veer off in an unexpected direction. The final Gestalt grouping principle is called closure, and this is when our perceptual system closes gaps or missing parts in an image. Now, this is rather difficult to find in nature or around my neighborhood, so I'll go ahead and include an image in the next slide. Now that we see how we organize through our Gestalt grouping principles, let's see how this all comes together and look at a theory that tells us how we recognize. Recognition by components theory. We recognize an object based on the edges and how they relate to each other, and most importantly, the vertices. Unknown objects are much easier to identify when the vertices are present. Take this picture for instance. Do you recognize this object? How about now? In this drawing where the vertices are present. Do you recognize it? If you guessed a teacup, you're correct. The example of the teacup shows how recognition occurs in our brain with the help of vertices and components and an object present. Now, let's talk about what happens if someone is unable to perceive. This is called agnosia, and it's defined as a deficit in recognizing objects, and there are 2 types. The first type is called apperceptive agnosia. Apperceptive agnosia is when individual features cannot be integrated into a whole. For example, if someone with apperceptive agnosia saw this example, they would not be able to pick out each individual shape, as you can now. A person with apperceptive agnosia would also not be able to copy shapes, like in this example. Associative agnosia is the second type, and a person with this condition would be able to combine features into a whole, but cannot associate the pattern with meaning. So, for example, people with associative agnosia can copy shapes, but they can't name what they are or associate a meaning with that shape. Those 2 types of agnosia are the most common, but now let's talk about one that is rare. Prosopagnosia is when someone is unable to identify faces. So, for example, if I had this condition and I was going to a restaurant to meet my friend, I would most likely walk right past her in the booth, even if I looked her right in the face, because I would be unable to recognize her. Now, why is this important? Because we perceive and recognize every day in our lives. And isn't it fun to see how our brain organizes things to be able to do so? After watching this video, I encourage you to walk around your neighborhood and find the Gestalt principles that you can find, and think about how your brain is using pattern recognition every day. In conclusion, today we learned about perception and pattern recognition. We learned about our 5 Gestalt grouping principles, we tackled the recognition by components theory, and then finally we looked at what can go wrong when our perception systems don't work. Hope you learned a little something today. Bye! Thanks for watching. Made by Neely Brown. All rights go to Neely and the snail. Stay safe and healthy.